When the Heartbreak Kid Shawn Michaels faced the Undertaker inside a wrestling ring, magic would always happen. Generally speaking, the two men were able to put on consistent good matches and create memorable moments throughout their careers in the WWE. While most will remember their show-stealing performances at WrestleMania, Shawn and Undertaker crossed paths a few other times, and when they did, us fans would be on the edge of our seats. The Shawn vs Undertaker series includes some of my favourite matches of all time. Join me as we take a trip down memory lane and look at the history of HBK versus the Phenom. In Your House Ground Zero was touted as the first time Undertaker and Shawn squared off against each other in singles competition. This is not entirely true. The first recorded match we have of Shawn vs Undertaker was a house show in February in '95, which Undertaker won by countout. This would have been the month before WrestleMania 11, so Shawn would have been working as a bad guy here. After Shawn turned babyface, the two would actually tag up quite a bit with each other at house shows and during dark matches, most of these happening during 1996. Throughout most of '97, Undertaker and Shawn were kept apart, both on house shows and on TV. At SummerSlam in 1997, champion Undertaker was scheduled to defend his WWF Championship against the Hitman Bret Hart, with Shawn being booked as the special guest referee. Shawn would cost The Undertaker his title after hitting him on the head with a steel chair by accident and proceeding to count 1, 2, 3 as Bret pinned the Taker. This happened because a stipulation stated if Shawn Michaels didn't call the match right down the middle, he would have to leave the WWF. Undertaker would go searching for Shawn Michaels after the match, but Shawn had already ran backstage. On the 18th of August 97 edition of Raw, just a few weeks later, Shawn would find himself in a tag match with Triple H against Undertaker and Mankind. This was the first televised tag match of the group that would go on to be known as D-Generation X. As a side note, this is also the first time Undertaker ever teamed with Mankind. The match ended with Shawn Michaels hitting more chair shots on The Undertaker, busting the dead man open and solidifying Shawn Michaels as a heel once again. A few weeks later, Shawn Michaels vs Undertaker was booked for In Your House Ground Zero. This was billed as the first meeting between Shawn and Taker, and unfortunately, in my opinion, this one didn't live up to the hype and is maybe the weakest of all the Shawn vs Taker matches. While the two did tell a story in the ring, there was a real overuse of referee bumps and underhanded tactics throughout the match, resulting in 4 referees being used. It's also a match that I seem to remember taking place outside the ring more than inside the ring, but when I watched it back there is plenty of action in the ring, but it just isn't as good as the matches they would have in the future. In the end, the referees could not control this showdown and referee Tim White declared the match a no contest. It was clear that these two needed to be contained and no one should be able to interfere in a match between Shawn and Taker. This led to the first ever Hell in a Cell match, a match concept that Shawn Michaels takes credit for creating. Before moving to the Hell in a Cell match though, just a quick side note that Shawn and Undertaker met again during a Raw Dark match on September 22nd, 1997. However, it also featured Bret Hart. This was a triple threat match. The full match is yet to be released, however WWE have released a short clip of the match on their YouTube page. So at the following In Your House pay-per-view, Bad Blood, Undertaker and Shawn would meet again in this new cage structure that had a roof on the top. People like to point to Undertaker vs Mankind as the pinnacle of Hell in a Cell matches, and with good reason too. What Mick Foley went through in that match was crazy, and he set a seriously high standard of risk that has not yet been met. In saying that, personally speaking, and this is just my opinion, I do think Shawn Michaels vs Undertaker at Bad Blood was the better match. Hear me out though and let me explain. Shawn and Undertaker had the job here of setting the tone for Hell in a Cell and future Cell matches. They done an incredible job of making the cell structure seem like a scary place to be in. In particular, Shawn showed early on he didn't want to be in there as he played up to his anxiety, trying to find a way out while Undertaker stalked him in the ring. Shawn's offense was quick and snappy, and he would need to resort to using the cell and any available weapons to his advantage. It seemed more like a match of survival, and it really was one of those matches where you didn't know what was going to happen next. Though in the end, Kane would make his debut, rip off the cell door, tombstone the Undertaker, and allow a bloody and beat up Shawn Michaels to get the win. I can't say enough good things about Hell in the Cell featuring Shawn Michaels and Undertaker. A lot of people talk about the psychology of a wrestling match, and, for me at least, I find it difficult to explain in words. Some people also believe that psychology in wrestling is a bullshit term, but if I needed to present an example of psychology and storytelling in wrestling, a match I would point to is Shawn vs Taker at Bad Blood. This was storytelling to me at its finest. On that note, it would be cool to hear what matches you guys consider as good examples of psychology in wrestling, so do let me know in the comments. Much of the remainder of 1997 featured Undertaker defeating Shawn Michaels by disqualification on the house show loop, thanks to interference mainly from DX and Kane. Shawn picked up the WWF title at Survivor Series in Montreal, and Undertaker would be getting a title shot at the Royal Rumble in 1998. This would be a casket match. The casket match is probably most famous for the back bump Shawn takes on the casket, which resulted in him seriously hurting himself and getting forced into his first early retirement. The match was still good. Michaels didn't seem hurt after the bump, but he did say it was the next morning when he felt the pain. So Kane would once again interfere in this match, and the show ended with the casket getting set on fire with the Undertaker still inside. This would set up Kane vs Undertaker at WrestleMania, and at the same show, Shawn would drop the belt to Steve Austin and begin his retirement. Undertaker would continue working in the WWE, changing with the times and holding down the fort as one of WWE's premier long-time superstars. Shawn overcame his demons, got healthy, and felt good with his back. Shawn made a comeback to the WWE and was mainly featured on the Raw brand, while Undertaker was a SmackDown mainstay. The two wouldn't cross paths again until the Royal Rumble in 2007, and when they did, it was absolute magic. Shawn and Taker ended up being the final two participants standing in the Royal Rumble, and the San Antonio crowd went wild as two legends squared off to see who would go to WrestleMania as part of the main event. The two battled longer than normal for the last two in a Rumble match, and the crowd was eating it up. In the end, Undertaker eliminated Michaels, but WWE must have took note. Taker and HBK together was money, and it would have been silly not to capitalise on further meetings between the two legends. Both Shawn and Undertaker would end up getting title shots that same year at WrestleMania. Undertaker was victorious, but Shawn was not. The two were kept apart more or less once again until WrestleMania 25 in 2009. Shawn would have to earn the right to face Undertaker and challenge the streak though, but he did so successfully after defeating JBL and Vladimir Kozlov. The WrestleMania 25 match between Shawn and Undertaker is considered as one of the greatest WrestleMania matches of all time, and for very good reason. The entrances were great as Shawn and Undertaker represented their contrasting beliefs by wearing white and black. The crowd was amped up for the match as the two legends of the WWE squared off, with Shawn determined to end the Undertaker's streak, knowing that he had beaten him before. Of note, during the match, Undertaker knocked himself out after diving over the top rope, but was somehow able to pull himself together and continue the match at a high level. But this is really the only time the match slowed down. Even with this hiccup, it seriously added to the drama and didn't affect the match at all. Undertaker was a complete pro during this match. False finishes are, I believe, a little overused in today's wrestling, with wrestlers kicking out of finishers up to 4 or 5 times during a match. Undertaker vs Shawn at WrestleMania 25 did have a lot of false finishes, but each one legit made you feel like the match just could have ended. It was done the right way, with the correct emotion shown after each kick out. This match, I believe, has set a trend for false finishes, but also that really isn't a bad thing. It just speaks to the volumes of how well it was done right here in this match. When Shawn hit that last super kick, it was the first time I recall thinking, shit, the streak is over. As we know, The Undertaker won the match, but both men would get high praise for the performance. Not only did they possibly have the greatest WrestleMania match in history, but one of the greatest matches ever in the WWE. To their credit, the WWE did not hotshot the rematch on a lesser pay-per-view, but instead they would let us believe that the rivalry was now over. During the Slammy Award presentations in 2009, Shawn vs Undertaker would capture the Match of the Year award for their performance at WrestleMania 25. Shawn Michaels accepted the award, and to the shock of everybody, Shawn stopped in the middle of his acceptance speech and said, "You know what, Undertaker, I can beat you," as he challenged the Dead Man to a rematch at WrestleMania 26. Undertaker, though, was reluctant to give Shawn Michaels the rematch. Undertaker was the World Heavyweight Champion at this time, so Shawn figured all he needed to do to get his rematch would be to enter the Royal Rumble and win the match, thusly earning him a title shot against the champion of his choice. He unfortunately failed in his efforts. Shawn then decided the best course of action would be to cost the Undertaker the world title and poke the bear into giving him his rematch, and this is exactly what Shawn did at the 2010 Elimination Chamber. The following night on Raw, The Undertaker changed his mind and accepted the rematch, but with the stipulation that if Shawn Michaels loses, he would have to retire. Shawn Michaels accepted the challenge, saying that if he could not end the streak, there was no reason why his career should continue. The match was billed as Streak vs Career, and Undertaker vs Shawn would rightfully main event WrestleMania 26. People tend to compare the two WrestleMania matches Undertaker and Shawn had at WrestleMania 25 and 26 respectively, and while I agree with the masses that the WrestleMania 25 match was better, I believe it was only slightly better. Being a massive Shawn Michaels fan, I had a little bit more of an emotional investment in this match because I knew it would be the final time we would see Shawn working in a WWE ring, obviously not including the Saudi Arabia match that would happen years down the line. We kinda knew the outcome of the match before the opening bell even rung. Shawn had been speaking about retirement for a long time, and you just knew as you were watching the showdown that this was his final outing. The two had another show-stealing performance, with Shawn showing he was defiant until the very end as he taunted and slapped Undertaker in the face in the final moments of the match, only to meet his end with a giant tombstone piledriver. Shawn didn't want a giant celebration on his way out the door the following night on Raw, but instead he had a farewell speech in the ring. The speech was interrupted by his long-time rival, The Undertaker, who tipped his hat to Shawn Michaels in a show of respect. The rivalry was now over.